You have one more Sunday left, okay? I just want you to know that. Which will be the end of the month. And I have a series that I'm going to do. It's going to be bookend, okay? First Sunday and last Sunday of the month. And it's based on a book by Jim Rosemergy. Many of you who've been in Unity for a while know him. He's a great writer. He's a great minister. He's a great person. And he's written just a book called Gathering of the Few. Gathering of the Few. And it's a great read. It's a fairly, quick read, but it's a great read, and I recommend it highly. And most of my thoughts that have come through today, are about gathering of the few. And, most of us, let me get this here first, okay? Thank you. Most of us have heard the statement, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of you, right? Like this. Would you take that over, please? So, the next slide. Are we having a problem? Well, the next slide says, Matthew 18:20, where two or more, that's not the slide, let's go, but anyway, it says, where two or more of you are, and stay right there, are gathered, there I will be in the midst of you. Nope, go back. Okay, we're going to get this here straight. Ha ha! Now, applaud. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Now, you know what that means. And we have a few of us gathered here today. And that means that the Christ presence, the I am, that is universal, that ties us together as spiritual beings. That's what's happening this morning. And it's happening, thank goodness, all over the world. Maybe with different concepts, different ways of understanding Jesus, different ways of understanding one's religious experience. But it is happening that people all over the world this morning and throughout the week are gathering as a few. And that Christ presence that's really within them comes together and it ties together their energy. And anytime that happens, you see, we're having a spiritual experience. Now, we're on a path. We are on a journey that really will bring us all together in oneness at some point in history. I do believe that with all my heart. Doesn't look like it some days. Really doesn't look like it when I watch TV. But what they call the news. And so, but I do believe that what we're doing is going through what we need to go through to get where we need to be. And so as we do that, we start to understand that if we see the world from a spiritual perspective, we will find our way on the journey. And that includes being together with others. If I had not gone to a Unity church, I wouldn't be in Unity. I didn't even know what it was. But I felt, as many people said, at home. And so as we start to understand what happens and how do we come to this point where the world changes. And I want to introduce the next slide, which is which you've seen already, okay? Which is a book many of you may or may not know, written in 1982 by John Nesbitt. Now, John Nesbitt was Undersecretary of Education in the Kennedy administration, so it goes back a ways, okay? He became a personal assistant to President Johnson. He became a professor at Harvard, at Moscow University, at China University, okay? And he wrote about this concept of megatrends. But the thing that really left to us in many ways as a legacy is the idea of a tipping point. And a tipping point is a way in which we come together and a mass, if you would, a critical mass takes place. And that's when things change. I mean, change universally. For example, I do believe that someday somebody's going to walk into a Unity church or a New Thought church, and they're going to be the person who is the tipping point, where we move from being a smaller group to a much larger group. And as we become a much larger group, we then have much more influence on the world. And then there will be a tipping point where there will be this critical mass where people start to understand, enough people know who and what we are. We're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. Know this and then start to act like it. Because everybody says, aha, I got it. And it wakes other people up who don't even know anything about unity, which is really important. Not important. It's understanding who they are. And so many of you have heard this story, and if you just click that one time, please, of Makata monkeys. In 1952, a wildlife person, and we don't know who it is anonymously, noticed that the Makata monkeys on an island in the Philippines began to wash their sweet potatoes, which is their favorite food, in the water. And a few did that. It was mostly the younger, the babies, who did it. And eventually there were, they say, 100 monkeys that came to the water to wash their sweet potatoes. And when that happened, now this is critical mass, when that happened, what happened is monkeys, Makata monkeys, across on other islands started doing the same thing. They didn't send an email. They didn't text them. It just took place because of the power of energy and that mass, critical mass that was needed to have monkeys throughout the world start to wash their sweet potatoes. You know, the only monkeys who would not were the adults, the older adults. They never got it. They continued to eat the gritty sweet potatoes because that's what it was like. That's what they were supposed to do as far as they were concerned. And so what happens is that you and I are similar in that we will create, if you would, an opportunity for the world to literally change. That's what we're here for. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every person you knew could share with you unconditional love? Wouldn't it be wonderful if every person you knew could be kind to their families, kind to their children, kind to one another? Wouldn't it be just wonderful if each of us came together with no drama, with no issues, because we've worked through it, let it go, and we're now living in the present moment as spiritual beings? You know, the reason that we don't change generally, and the reason things that go on that are uncomfortable is usually based on fear. We fear something. So if you're uncomfortable in your skin sometimes, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And when you start to ask yourself that question, you start to go into what Jim Rosemergy calls the cave, the inner self. And you start to look at what's really going on inside of me. And as you are willing to ask those questions, you begin to heal, you begin to grow. And you find yourself one day thinking totally different than you did the day before. That's what can happen for us when we're willing to become like the 100th monkey. And now, the next thing is that, Jim Rosemergy wrote in another book about 3 comings. Thank you. One was the coming of a master. The first coming is the coming of a master, like Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Gandhi, King, and there are people today, I think Ken Wilber is one of them, who are going to become known as masters. And so masters are always appearing for us to guide us and directing because they got the message somewhere deep within themselves and they understand who we need to be and what we can be, and they demonstrate that to us. The second coming is the coming when an individual, has a spiritual experience, is transformed. Sometimes it happens in unity overnight. People go, oh my gosh, and they catch it. And they feel like, please understand this statement, that they're saved. Not saved by someone, but saved from themselves. Not saved by Jesus. But understand that the way they are seeing themselves is a salvation to them. And they understand it comes from within, not from outside. And that is a second coming. The third coming is on the way. And this is global spirituality, where the globe starts to see the world from a spiritual perspective. And when that happens, we're going to see war dry up. I really believe that. We're going to see, at least we're going to start to see the signs of it, and then the wars will dry up. We're going to see people loving each other. We're going to see people giving aid to one another in many different ways. Not just countries, individuals. And it's happening now. We just don't notice it much because we pay attention to the other stuff. And so we have this opportunity to understand and to become spiritual beings and a global spirituality. Think that way. And the more you think that way, the more it's probable of it happening quicker than you think. Maybe even while I'm still here. That'd be pretty quick, relatively speaking. But maybe, just maybe. We don't know. What I do know is that every time somebody walks in the door and comes to Unity Church or anywhere where they're seeking spiritual understanding, that they might be the one person that creates that tipping point. So let's always, as you are, be gracious to our guests and share with them the joy that we have here as you are doing this morning. And then the next thing, there are 3 commitments that are important. The first is, as I've been talking about, our personal transformation, okay? This is a commitment we make. And the commitment is more of, I understand that the only thing that's really important is how I see myself and others from a spiritual perspective. How I can see through somebody's stuff and love them. How when somebody reaches out and maybe hurts me, that I can understand it's an opportunity to learn something about myself. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to forgive. Now, I have a kind of weird understanding of forgiveness. I know that. Because what I believe is when somebody does something that I think hurts me, they are helping me. I can say thank you to them, not I forgive you. Because they've brought something into my life to make me aware of how I can show up in a much better, loving way. And that I said something or did something that created some kind of fear within them based on their past. May not have even known it. But what's happening was when they come back and share that with me, even in a mean way, I can say to myself, they're teaching me a lesson. So I don't need to forgive them, I need to thank them. And as we understand that concept of spiritual journey, we also understand that there is foundational principle. Now we talk about our 5 principles, but foundational principle is basically that I and you and God and Jesus and Mohammed are all one. We truly are all one. And in our oneness, we can share our lives. And that's when we start to approach this idea of spiritual global understanding. You see, if I stick just to myself, if I just stay, no disrespect, in unity, and unity is the right way, that's no difference than evangelical saying this is the only way. We just don't say it as loud. And I don't see much of that. But once in a while I run into people who kind of feel that way, that this is the only way. And we're out to change people because of that. But we do know in our hearts that there are many paths to God. And that what we have to use and what others have to do is choose the one that works for them. And makes them feel whole, which they are, and makes them understand the power of healing, and makes them understand that they can go into the cave and feel safe so they can grow. And so this is the foundational principle of understanding ourselves. And then there's a global spiritual awakening, which I've been talking about, obviously. I'm going to talk more about it at the end of the month when I really talk about your destiny. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I know the title. Your destiny. And I just changed it because I sent another title before, okay? But anyway, and so much of our spiritual growth depends upon not what we think, but what we do. I can think one thing and act another way, and the action will influence me more than my thinking. And that's when I go back into the cave and say, what's going on here? So I can understand this idea of being the spiritual being who continues to grow. I mean, one of the things that's amazing in this church is I can talk to 10 people on a morning here very quickly, and they've all been in the church from anywhere from 20 to 50 years, okay, or 30 years. It's amazing how many people you have been here. Why do they stay here? Well, they love the church. There's no doubt about that. They love the message. There's no doubt about that. But what they really love, I believe, is they continue to get a sense of growing spiritually. They understand it's not all over because I know the 5 principles. It's not all over because I took lessons in Truth and other great books. It's not all over. I'm still growing. I'm still searching. I'm still reaching out. But I'm doing so much better today because I am expressing who and what I am. Because I'm experiencing it. And I want to continue to experience it. That's what spiritual growth is all about. Continuing to experience the Christ within. And when I don't, to make any corrections that are necessary. So, just remember, and it reminds me a little bit of a story that just came to me, about when we gather together in 3 or more, 2, 3 or more, there I am, the I am is also. When I was in New Brunswick, Texas, and got an opportunity to speak at the church there, the night before they took me out to a club. They called it the club. It wasn't really a club. What it was a bar where everybody came to sit and talk. The music was in the background. So you'd go in, you sit down at a table, and we had 3 or 4 unit people, and we went to different tables. And people came and sat with us. Okay? And we didn't say, well, let's talk about unity tonight. But we did bring in, let's talk about what you believe tonight. What do you think about spiritual beings? What do you think about angels? Whatever. And the whole idea was the community during that evening was to talk about things that we don't normally talk about when we go to a bar. Right? And so, as we had this discussion, I watched and I felt the energy. It was much like the energy in here this morning. You could feel it. People were glad to share their differences. And there were differences. I had an Episcopalian, a Roman Catholic, a Jewish fellow, and myself. I think that's pretty diverse. Okay? And that was in Texas, by the way. Okay? Amazing. And we had a great conversation. And we started talking about that we all are following the path that leads us to our understanding of God. And that we were all growing and having benefit from it. There was nobody who said, well, you ought to become a Catholic. There was somebody who said you ought to become unity. No, nobody said you ought to become unity, okay? It was just a wonderful, open conversation, and they did this once a week at this particular bar. See, that's spiritual growth. It's a wonderful opportunity to know oneself, to know your neighbor, and to find God everywhere. Thank you. So, let's take this moment to really find ourselves. To go within. To think deeper. To feel the presence of Spirit. And in that presence, ask yourself, what is mine to do in my spiritual growth? Say to yourself, what is my next step in my spiritual journey? And then affirm, I give thanks for the answers that will come to me. And as you allow yourself to feel whatever necessary, to experience whatever is necessary, you realize in this moment that you're on the right track. That literally by asking the questions you are growing. And by listening to the questions or the answers, you are becoming what you envision. This is your moment, your opportunity, your blessing. And we give thanks in the name and in the power of the Christ within each and every one of us. And so it is. Amen.
Flow, Spirit, flow through me as I open up to be and express